Hi, I'm Tim. In this lesson, you'll learn to play Bach's Musette in G major. Before you begin, you should know some fundamental piano concepts like the names of the notes on the keyboard, how to read the notes on the staff in treble and bass clef, and how to read rhythms. If you're not familiar with these concepts, you can learn them in the basic series of lessons available in GarageBand. You can also use the glossary at the top right of the screen for more information on some of the topics we'll cover. While learning to play Bach's Musette in G major, you'll also learn about legato playing, polyphony, and the 2/2 time signature. Johann Sebastian Bach was a German composer. He's considered to be the most important composer of the Baroque period of Western music, spanning from 1600 to 1750. He wrote many pieces for the keyboard instruments of his time that are still highly regarded for classical piano. Bach wrote Musette in G major primarily for teaching his own students. It was likely inspired by the sound of a popular instrument in Bach's time, the musette, which was like a bagpipe, and had a constant bass note or drone that sustained under the melody part. Bach wrote a drone note as part of this piece to give it the character of a musette. The piece is in the style of a popular French folk dance called a gavotte. A gavotte is distinctive because the phrases begin in the middle of a measure, usually on the third beat. It's structured in four four-measure phrases with two main sections. We'll call the first four-measure phrase the A section, and the rest of the piece the B section. With these two sections, the piece is in an A-B form, which is called binary form. Before you get started, go to the play chapter of this lesson and listen to the piece all the way through, so you'll have a better idea of what you'll be learning. It's very common in Baroque music to have multiple melodies playing at the same time. Each melody may have a different rhythm and different notes, but they all work together to create the harmony of the piece. The term for this type of music is polyphony. Bach is particularly famous for writing sophisticated polyphonic music that also has a strong sense of harmony. The piece has three parts that play together to create the harmony. We'll call them the upper melody, the lower melody, and the drone. Here's the upper melody of the first phrase of Bach's Musette, played with the right hand. And here's the lower melody, which is played at the same time with the left hand. Now that you've heard both melodies separately, listen to how they work together to create the polyphonic harmony. The key to playing polyphonic music on the piano is understanding where each melody fits into the music so you can connect the notes to make each melody sound independent. In other words, you should try to give each melody its own voice, as if a separate instrument were playing each part. Bach wrote this piece using a 2/2 time signature rather than the more common 4/4. This time signature is called cut time. 2/2 time means that there are two beats in a measure instead of the usual four, with a half note getting one beat. Here's how to count the first few measures of the upper melody in 2/2 time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. While you're learning the piece, you may find it easier to count in 4/4 time like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. As we learn the different phrases and melodies in this lesson, we'll count in 4/4 time. Once you're comfortable with the rhythms and you're ready to practice the entire piece, try to count in 2/2 to get the proper two-beat pulse appropriate for the gavotte style. In Bach's Musette, long curved lines are shown over groups of notes. These articulation markings are called slurs, and they indicate that these notes should be played with a smooth and connected feel. This is called legato playing. Here are the first few measures of the piece played without legato articulation. Now listen to the way the notes sound connected when I play the same section legato. When you play the piece, pay attention to the slur markings and try to keep the notes under the slur smooth and connected. A segment of music is called a phrase, similar to a sentence in speech. It's a complete musical idea. In Bach's musette, each phrase is 4 measures long. Most of them are built from 2 legato groups, which can also be called figures. To play this piece correctly, it's important to lift gently with your wrists at the end of a figure, creating a short break between each slur, like this. Here's the first phrase of the piece. Listen for the space between the 2 figures. Many players find it helpful to breathe with the music, as if they were singing the melodies. Once you start putting the sections together, try taking a short breath between each legato figure, and a deeper breath at the end of each phrase. This can help you naturally feel the phrasing of the piece. The A section of Bach's musette is made from 1 phrase of music. The phrase is divided into 2 legato figures. We'll start with the upper melody, which is played with the right hand. It goes like this. This piece is in the key of G, so all of the Fs are sharp, as the key signature shows. Let's start with the first legato figure. Begin with your 3rd finger on the D. Cross under with your thumb to the D, then up to the G with your 3rd finger for the rest of the figure. Play that with me. Remember that the music begins on the 3rd beat. 3, 4, 1, 2. Make sure you're playing each note under the slur for its full duration, lifting slightly with your wrist at the end of the legato figure. Play it again, focusing on a smooth, connected feeling. 3, 4, 1, 2. For the lower melody in the left hand, a slur is not shown. However, you should play this left-hand melody using the same legato articulation and phrasing as the upper melody, like this. Play it with me starting with your 3rd finger on B. 3, 4, 1, 2. The drone stays on G for the entire piece, to give the music the sound of the musette instrument. This G is always played with your 5th finger, and it's held down while the lower melody moves, like this. The challenge is to keep the lower melody quarter notes smooth and legato while holding down the G in the bass. Try it with me. 3, 4, 1, 2. Before you try putting both hands together, make sure you're comfortable with the separate right and left hand parts. If you need to, pause the lesson and practice both parts separately. Here's what the first figure sounds like with both hands. Try it with me at a slow tempo. Playing both hands takes a lot of practice, so don't worry if you can't get it right away. 3, 4, 1, 2. Before moving on, you can go to the practice chapter of this lesson and work on this part of the piece. The upper melody for the next legato figure starts with your third finger on a G. Then cross under with your first finger to play a G, followed by a series of eighth notes. Since this half note is at the end of the phrase, it should be lightly released, leading with your wrist to give some space before the next phrase. Play the right hand part with me, starting on the third beat. 3, 4, 1, 2. For the left hand lower melody and drone, the fifth finger is still sustaining through on the G from the previous measure. The lower melody continues on quarter notes. And at the end of the phrase, the tied G drone stops and a half note G is played. Play the left hand part with me. 3, 4, 1, 2. Again, make sure that you're completely comfortable with both hands before trying to put them together. If you feel ready, try both hands with me. 3, 4, 1, 2. When you put both of the legato sections together, you have the A section of the piece. Play along with me if you like, making sure to lightly lift your wrists to release the notes at the end of both legato figures. 3, 4, 1, 2. When you play the entire piece, the A section is repeated before moving on to the B section. Try working on the individual parts in the practice chapter, focusing on the legato phrasing while you play. The B section of Bach's musette has 3 phrases. Here's the first phrase of the B section. Beginning with the upper melody for the first legato figure, start on D with your fourth finger. When you get to the third beat, play the B with your third finger rather than your second. And then move your hand down again to play the A with your fourth finger, so your hand is in place to play the next 2 quarter notes. Try that with me, legato for the entire part. 3, 4, 1, 2. For the left-hand part, the G drone starts again at the beginning of the phrase with your fifth finger. The lower melody plays quarter notes, this time going up to an E with your first finger. D with your second, then crossing under with your first to play the C. Then use your third finger to play the B, so your hand is back in place for the rest of the phrase. Play the left-hand part with me. 3, 4, 1, 2. When you're ready, you can put both hands together. 3, 4, 1, 2. The second part of the phrase is the most delicate part of the entire piece. We'll talk more about dynamics in a later section, but for now, just keep in mind that this part of the phrase should be played with a light touch. The right hand for the second part of the phrase is a series of eighth notes starting with your second finger on E. Up to an A with your fifth finger, and finishing the phrase with your fourth and second fingers on an F sharp and A. Try that with me, keeping your playing light. 3, 4, 1, 2. For the left hand, the G drone is sustained from the previous measure with your fifth finger. For the lower melody, your second finger should be on the C. The G bass note is not replayed at the end like it was in the previous phrase. Try the left hand with me, keeping the playing delicate like you did with the right hand. 3, 4, 1, 2. When you're comfortable with both hands, put them together. 3, 4, 1, 2. Once you've learned both of these legato figures, you can put them together to play the entire phrase. Remember that the G bass note sustains throughout the entire phrase. 3, 4, 1, 2. The second phrase of the B section isn't made from two figures like the previous one. It's one long legato phrase. I'll play it for you first. The right hand part begins with your second finger on A. Then on the third beat, move your hand up to play the E with your fifth finger. Move your hand down to play the first beat of the next measure with your fourth finger on C. On the second eighth note of the next measure, play the G with your first finger, then cross over with your third finger to play the F sharp, on through the rest of the phrase. Try playing the right hand with me. We'll take it a bit slower because of the challenging fingering. 3, 4, 1, 2. For the left hand, sustain the G in the bass, and with the lower melody, start on C with your second finger. When you get to the first beat, cross over with your second finger to play the E. Then back down with your first finger on D. Play the E with your first finger, then cross under to play the C and finish the phrase. Play this part with me, also a little slower, to follow the finger crossings. 3, 4, 1, 2. When you feel comfortable with both parts, try them together. Remember to have your left hand play the entire phrase legato along with your right. 3, 4, 1, 2. The last phrase of the B section starts with a legato figure that's almost identical to the first few measures of the piece, then continues on to the end. I'll play it for you first. The only difference between the first part of this phrase and the first part of the piece is that the left-hand lower melody ends on a rest rather than a C. If you've already learned both hands for the A section, play them with me for the first part. 3, 4, 1, 2. The second part of this phrase ends the piece. The right-hand part makes a lot of melodic jumps before finishing. It should be played very delicately. Start with your fifth finger on the B. As soon as you play the low D with your first finger, spread your hand out so you're ready to play the next note an octave up with your fifth finger. Back down to an F sharp with your second finger. Sustain the tied D throughout the last measure, and then a G to finish the phrase. Play it with me. 3, 4, 1, 2. The left-hand part becomes much more sparse. Bach probably minimized the number of notes in the left hand to reduce the amount of sound, allowing the upper melody in the right hand to be clearer and bring the piece to a quiet conclusion. The G continues to sustain in the bass, and the lower melody plays back and forth from D to B. The challenge here is to maintain a legato feel while still observing the rests between each quarter note. Play it with me. 3, 4, 1, 2. When you're ready, try both hands together. Stay light for this part, and lift at the end of the phrase to complete the piece. 3, 4, 1, 2. Now the entire last phrase. 3, 4, 1, 2. Bach played all of the keyboard instruments of his time, which included the organ, harpsichord, and clavichord. These instruments all had a keyboard similar to a modern piano. Unlike the piano, they didn't have a wide dynamic range, so he didn't include markings in his score to indicate where to play louder or softer. However, playing Bach's musette on piano gives you many options to add more feeling to the piece with volume changes or dynamics. Here are some ideas you can try with each phrase of the piece to make it more interesting. Start the piece softly, known as piano when referring to dynamics in music, and indicated with a P in the notation. With each legato figure, you can swell the volume a little bit in the middle and bring it back down to piano at the end of the slur. This will help emphasize the phrasing of the piece. Here's the A section using that idea. The next phrase should start at a mezzo forte level, meaning medium loud, making a contrast between the quiet A section and the B section. Then gradually bring the second part of the phrase back down to a quiet piano dynamic. In the second phrase of the B section, you'll be coming from the delicate sound of the previous phrase. With this long legato passage, you can gradually increase the volume, then bring it back down at the end of the phrase. For the last phrase, try playing the first part at a piano level and the last part of the phrase even quieter, or pianissimo, which means very quiet, all the way to the light lift of the last note of the piece. While playing this piece with dynamic variation will add a lot to the feel and interpretation of the music, make sure you always pay attention to the phrasing. And as you get more comfortable with the parts, make sure that the upper melody is always the strongest of the three voices. It's the most important melody of the piece and needs to always be a bit louder. The play chapter includes a chamber ensemble to accompany you. These instrumental parts were not written by Bach, and they probably aren't the way he imagined the piece would be played, but you may find it fun to have the other instruments accompany you while you play. If you'd like to learn some other music, you can find more piano lessons for classical and pop music in the GarageBand store. I hope you have fun.